Five Nights at Freddy's hasn't always been known for glitches and errors.
Whoa! Bug! I found one! What the—
But that obviously doesn't mean it didn't have them. But there's so little information on what and how stuff breaks that I've decided I'll be the one to document them. All of them. I said, like now, 17 months ago. It took a lot of time and effort, but the time was mostly because I was busy. But over that time, I and a few others have gathered for you today 172 glitches, bugs, errors, exploits, and mistakes from the original 7 mainline games. Now, just before we begin, I made the jump scares a ton quieter. Any and all questions are encouraged in the comments, and captions and timestamps are provided if you so desire. With that said, let's get to these glitches, because boy can they break things.
I'm just gonna act like that didn't happen.
Of course though, I need to set some ground rules to explain which ones I'm covering. I'm only including the main games made in ClickTeam Fusion, so I'm basically not dealing with anything past Ultimate Custom Night. Those games have so much more content and are many times more complex, I could not and cannot cover them adequately. Furthermore, this is specifically discussing the latest version of the original PC release, not ports. Though they do share many of the same issues, they're still under active development and things get complicated quick when you're dealing with multiple different console variations and versions. There also won't be any glitches exclusively caused by significant lag, anything related to the default ClickTeam keyboard shortcuts like pausing or toggling sound, errors caused by running out of memory, and other undiagnosable computer errors of the sort. There are basically unlimited unique ways the games will break under those circumstances, and not really through any fault of the game itself. And no, I'm not including lore, typos, or render errors. We're just gonna have to assume that's how you spell pizzeria in the FNAF universe, and Bunny being able to float is a real part of the canon. Now, with all that done, let's first check out the glitches that appear across multiple games. It'd be impossible for me to make this video and not mention being able to beat the night while being jump scared, but its status as a glitch is unclear. On one hand, it is possible in FNAF 1, 2, 3, 4, and Pizzeria Simulator, but on the other, it is a feature that's got intentionally patched out of Sister Location's private room and isn't present in Ultimate Custom Night. So it could be intended, or it could be unintended and just wasn't that important. There are also a few exceptions to this because of how the games work. Golden Freddy and Power Out Freddy in FNAF 1, and Nightmare or Nightmarion in FNAF 4 take you to a separate frame of the application to jump scare you, so the gameplay isn't even running at that point and you can't hit 6 AM. Another issue I cannot make this video without acknowledging is your monitor getting stuck and not being able to pull it down again. I've looked into this and it's been an issue in FNAF 1, 2, 3, and Sister Location's private room and custom night. What's supposed to happen is that when you flip the monitor, it sets a value called flip it to 1, then resets it to 0 when the monitor animation completes. It gets stuck when there's enough lag that the full monitor flip animation completes within a frame, and the flip it value gets reset to 0 before it's even set to 1, so it gets stuck at 1, stopping you from flipping the monitors because it thinks the animation isn't done. It is possible to create a camera system that isn't vulnerable to this. Ultimate Custom Night pulls it off, but I can say this bug will only occur with a lot of lag, so I won't be officially counting it. The last place you'd look for a glitch is the main menu, but it is a little broken in FNAF 1, 2, and 3. First of all, once you've clicked on a night, it takes 20 frames to actually send you to the night, but you can still move to other options during that time, and because that also changes the selected night number, you get sent to a different night than you actually clicked. And this is what allows you to skip the Night 1 newspaper whenever you want, as you can click continue and then just press up or hover over new game, updating the night number to 1 but sending you to the normal night screen, not showing the newspaper as would happen if you had clicked new game. If you have Night 1 as your saved night but have the Night 6 or Custom Night buttons unlocked, The first time you try to select those buttons, it'll immediately change back to the continue button. The game is supposed to default your selection to continue if you have a saved night above 1, but it doesn't just check once when you open the menu. If it fails because your saved night isn't above 1, it keeps checking until it is above 1. Hovering over the night 6 or custom night buttons sets the night number to 6 or 7 and erroneously triggers the default selection event. But there's one more, much more serious glitch on the title screen. If you hover over the continue button for one frame and have a different option selected on the next frame, you'll see a weird night number showing very briefly. That number is the level number in your save, which after beating the custom night is an even higher number than you'd ever play. Normally this doesn't show because it limits the night number to 5 if you have the continue button selected. But because of how events are ordered, the game sets the night number based on what you had selected on the previous frame. So you can select the continue button for one frame, then immediately move to a different option, which will still set the night number to what the continue button should be, night 8 or whatever is in the save file. But now because you technically don't have the continue button selected, the night number doesn't get limited. Of course, it will still change to that new selection on the very next frame, but if you time it exactly so it's showing night 8 after the 20 frames it takes from clicking continue, you just get sent straight into night 8. It's actually not harder than night 6, with AI levels of 0, 10, 10, and 3, but beating it unfortunately just results in a soft lock and it doesn't save that you beat the level. In the second game, it also soft locks at 6 AM, but it does save the beaten level. It also soft locks if you open the cameras because there isn't a set default camera for nights above 7, but it's still thankfully beatable as Foxy is the only active AI, so you can climb the nights as high as you want. And thankfully the third game doesn't soft lock at all and allows you to get to whatever night you want, but it's just night 6 over and over. In FNAF 2 and 3, the white blip animation does not disappear if you're no longer using the monitor. Oddly enough, this wasn't an issue in the first game. The original correctly makes it invisible when closing the monitor. And the last thing that appears across games is a mistake with the random number generator, which was actually the topic of my last video. The video goes into a lot more detail and more RNG shenanigans, but here's the main idea. In the game engine, the random function used for all the randomness in the games has a limit of 65,535, but nothing stops you from putting in a larger number, and exceeding the limit doesn't even cap the number at 65,000, it overflows. This type of error only occurs 3 times in the series, the main ones being Golden Freddy and RWQ FSFASXC, who are supposed to have odds of 1 in 100,000 and 1 in a million respectively, but end up being 3 times and 60 times as likely, and are actually 1 in 32,768 and 1 in 16,384. The third time this happens, it's just to some numbers on the breaker control box that were supposed to be numbers from 0 to a billion, but only end up going from 0 to 51,000. But that's everything that's in multiple games, so let's start dissecting the original. The first game has an incredibly long 8-minute and 55-second night, but it could have been worse because that's a mistake. The game counts seconds up to 90, which then increments the hour, but when resetting the seconds, it resets to 1 for some reason. So while the first hour is 90 seconds, every hour after the first one is only 89 seconds, ending the night 5 seconds early. Jump scares are pretty susceptible to breaking in this game. I mean, you can just straight up flip your monitor up while Bonnie or Chica are yelling at you. This is unfortunately not able to actually reset the jump scare animation unless you are experiencing significant lag. As well, most of the animatronics don't really check if you're already being jump scared, so Freddy can interrupt Bonnie and Chica's jump scares. Foxy can also jump scare you during Bonnie and Chica's jump scares, but doesn't replace the image. He will override Freddy's jump scare though. Also, if Foxy brings down your camera for a jump scare, Bonnie or Chica can hijack it if they're ready, doubling up the jump scare sound. Chica and Bonnie can jump scare you after you run out of power. Running out of power during a jump scare vanishes any jump scaring animatronics, though Bonnie and Chica still end up sending you to the death screen because they're based on a timer rather than when the jump scare animation ends, like Foxy and Freddy. But did you see that? The fan was still animating for a decent amount of time. For some reason, rather than disappearing upon power down, it's tied to Freddy's power out RNG, so for at least 3 frames it doesn't disappear, and every frame afterwards has a 75% chance for it to disappear, though it's guaranteed when he moves on to the next stage. If you power out on the frame the monitor came up, the power left and usage text will stay visible. This is because while running out of power turns them invisible, opening the monitor makes them visible again. I'm not sure why the monitor makes them visible, nothing else makes them invisible, and the only thing that code ends up doing is cause this bug, but it is frame perfect though. The opposite camera problem plagues the fan and Halloween pumpkin, staying invisible after flipping the cameras. Those two objects are made invisible when flipping the monitor, and set to be visible if you're viewing The Office, but they have a special condition such that it only runs once each time you view The Office, rather than constantly re-triggering. But if you flip the tablet fast enough, the viewing variable effectively stays at 0, so the objects think you never stopped viewing The Office and won't be set to be visible again. Of course, the cameras themselves are a little off. You can honk Freddy's nose while watching them. There's just no check that stops you. When you run out of power, most of the visuals update a frame late, and this is what you see before it actually flips down the cameras. Also, Cam 1C's text disappears. It has no reason to, it shouldn't, but it does. Could this be important to the story? No, what? No, what do you mean? What? During the 5 seconds of static caused by Bonnie or Chica moving, the kitchen audio-only text won't disappear, even if you're not on the kitchen camera. The doors, door buttons, and Golden Freddy don't disappear on the first frame of cams being open, which allows you to place them wherever. The cameras Foxy can appear in are a little special, in that they depend on what progress he's made. As well, one of them is animated, and that requires a special condition so it doesn't change the camera image during Foxy's running animation. But then you run into the issue of the fact that the camera doesn't change while Foxy is running. It doesn't update to the animation, it doesn't update at all. If you bring down the cameras while he's running and bring them up again, you can see The Office in the cameras. Or if you click onto a different camera and click back to the West Hall, nothing happens. The same thing happens with Pirate Cove. Nothing is set to show up while he's running, so nothing does show up. Foxy can also break things when you use the door lights. Ordinarily, Foxy turns off the door lights when he's set to jump scare you, and the jump scare itself stops you from using them. But if you can somehow delay the actual jump scare, you can turn the lights back on and overwrite his jump scare image with the image of The Office lit up. You can do this by opening the door when he shows up. He's only set to either knock on the door if it's closed, or jump scare you if it's open, but while it's opening or closing, he'll wait. So if you time it right, you can open the door, Foxy turns off the door light, you turn it back on, he tries to jump scare you when the door finishes opening, but the light animation overwrites it, and you're stuck again in Office Purgatory. Being the first game in the series, it had some weird quirks in how he implemented animatronic movements. We'll use the term movement opportunity to describe when an enemy has the ability to move, usually a percentage chance. In the case of Bonnie and Chica, it's about every 5 seconds, with a tiny difference between the two. But Bonnie and Chica both use the same variable to determine who's moving on any given frame, and for the first couple movement opportunities, Chica and Bonnie's movements are so close together that they might try to move on the same frame, but Chica's is ordered after and will just overwrite Bonnie's movement. This means that despite Bonnie being at 20 AI, it's possible that he just does not move at the very start. Similarly to Foxy, if Bonnie or Chica are at a door and succeed a movement opportunity, they'll do nothing while the door is being closed or opened, waiting until the animation finishes. The other character is also able to overwrite their movement during that time. Bonnie and Chica play a weird noise called robot voice when they're in the hall corners, only on nights 4 and onwards. It's the same noise that plays when you get an It's Me hallucination. But if a hallucination plays on nights 1 to 3, and Bonnie or Chica are in the hall corners, it won't stop playing. It's only set to be muted if the hallucination is playing and neither of the animatronics are in the hall corners, forgetting that it's still supposed to be muted if it's before night 4. And to cover this game's last error, I need to briefly explain how audio works in Glitching Fusion. There are a couple ways you can play audio samples, but the method Scott uses in all the FNAF games is to play audio samples on a specific numbered audio channel. You can only play one sample at a time on any specific channel, so any new audio will cut it off, unless it's marked as uninterruptible. In the case of the monitor blip, window scare, nose honk, and Foxy knocking on the door, all of those sounds can very noticeably cut each other off, as they all use the same channel. Alright, on to the prequel. While all animatronics cause a signal interrupt when they enter a room, Balloon Boy and Withered Foxy don't cause camera static when leaving, which only a few animatronics do, but Balloon Boy and Withered Foxy also don't get stunned by the in-camera flashlight, so they can both suddenly disappear when they move. It looks like I cut the video, but no, they literally just pop out of existence. Both of them don't appear on many cameras, which is probably why this didn't get caught, but it is a very obvious oversight. The puppet's movement chance is slightly higher than intended. For every other AI, it's either random 20 is less than AI, or random 20 plus 1 is less than or equal to AI, which both mean that they have an AI level out of 20 chance to move, which is pretty intuitive. It seems like there being two different implementations for the exact same idea was a mistake that Scott had to fix for some of the characters. It looks like he never fixed the puppet, who uses random 20 is less than or equal to AI. It means the puppet's movements end up being AI plus 1 out of 20, though considering how fast he moves anyways, it barely makes any difference. Have you ever seen this paper pal in your office? You are probably playing the custom night. I know this because there's a bug that causes him to only appear in the custom night. The paper pal actually has an AI, which has a 1% chance of being 1 at the start of any night. Unfortunately, that's reset to 0 if it's not the custom night. This is because before setting what AI levels the night needs, it resets all AI levels, just so it doesn't need to put AI level 0 for every animatronic that doesn't appear that night. But the paper pal's AI is special because it gets set even before that, and always gets reset on any night other than the custom night. The AI levels don't need to be reset on the custom night because it just sets every level to the ones you selected, which is why the paper pal can appear at all. Golden Freddy has a similar problem, where an old fix resets his AI at the start of the night, making him never appear on nights 3 to 5 even though he was supposed to. He does appear on night 2 though, because his AI gets set at 1 AM. RWQ FSFASXC doesn't disappear when you're in danger, even though he's supposed to, because the check that makes him invisible is right before the check that makes him visible again. If you were holding the flashlight on a camera, flip cams down into an animatronic attack, and Golden Freddy spawns, even though you're not supposed to be able to shine the hall flashlight while in danger, it stays lit for 1 frame after closing cams, causing Golden Freddy to seemingly kill you for no reason. Weirdly enough, you can use the vent lights during an attack, no problem. It'll cause Withered Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica to disappear from the room, though temporarily. Does this mean that Toy Freddy is in some way more powerful? Yes. Most vent animatronics either only go into the vent opening if you're in the cameras or when you're not using the vent light, but Toy Chica doesn't check at all and is now the 3rd animatronic in this game that can just nonchalantly teleport before our very eyes. The hall light gets jammed by animatronics moving in the hall, but the jamming sound doesn't stop if you keep holding the light and flip up the cameras, nor if the hall light unjams. If you click a cam and immediately flip the monitor down, when you flip it back up, you might end up with 2 cameras selected. The monitor saves which camera you were last looking at, so when you flip it back up, you're still looking at the same camera. And this breaks in this instance because it only saves it every 0.2 seconds. So if you click a camera and flip it down before it saves it, the Your View object that stalls animatronics and handles sound moves to the camera you clicked, but when you open the monitor again, you'll be looking at the old camera. Shadow Freddy and Endo02 don't leave the cameras after looking at them for half a second. I actually made a whole video about how that went wrong, but the gist is that Scott was doing some debugging, made a testing object, but actually set some values to a non-test object, didn't remove the debug stuff, and didn't notice that he broke the mechanic. It should look like this. Jump scares that can occur while looking at the monitor will appear on top of cameras for the first frame, before the flip down animation appears. The flashlight text also stays on top of jump scares. Toy Bonnie and Mangle's in-camera jump scares do not check if you've already been attacked by another animatronic, which means either of them can override other jump scares if they attack on the same frame. Because those specific jump scares are ordered after the jump scare animation change code, the previous animatronic will still be visible on the first frame, before switching to Toy Bonnie or Mangle, and the jump scare sound is played twice, but on 2 subsequent frames, so it's pretty difficult to notice. You can see the parts and service and the show stage cameras for a frame in the custom night, even though they're disabled. They're supposed to be disabled because the custom night allows different combinations of animatronics to be on or off. There are no limits as to which animatronic can leave first. And because there isn't a render for every combination, in some circumstances this image will be incorrect. If the monitor is immediately forced down by an attacking animatronic, or you bring it down yourself, while a previous blackout was fading, a longer, bugged version of a blackout will occur. Using the monitor usually removes the blackout fade, but the monitor needs to be up for a full frame, and in this case it wasn't, and the game mistakenly redoes the previous 4-second fade, then does the normal blackout, but the texture is invisible because it thinks it just faded. Freddy's nose can't be honked in cameras like in the previous game, but it can be honked with the mask on. You can put the mask on while flipping up the monitor, which would soft lock you in older versions, but there was a band-aid fix in 1.03, where the mask would overwrite the camera view, but it still looks glitchy and both dropping animations play when you try to take it off. The first frame of the Save Them minigame looks a little weird because while the position is set on the first frame, the walls and some other props are set before the position is set, and only update on the second frame. Animatronics generally can't enter the office if there's another normal animatronic already inside, or if you don't have your camera up. But they still try and do make footstep noises, even when they didn't actually move. And Toy Bonnie will permanently cause camera static while cam stalled, even though he's not moving. Oddly enough, the footstep quirk only really applies to Mangle and Toy and Withered Freddy. All the others we just don't hear footsteps. When any animatronic, other than the puppet, moves in one of the party rooms, one of the walk sounds is supposed to play, but it usually doesn't. Unfortunately, for a long time, there was a bug in the game engine that caused audio channels to never again play an interruptible sound if an uninterruptible sound has ever played in it. The exact cause is unknown, either the flag never reset or sounds just failed to be cleared from the channel, but either way, generally it just doesn't work out if you have a mix of interruptible sounds and uninterruptible sounds in a single channel. Relating this to FNAF 2, the vent walk sounds are uninterruptible, along with the nose honk, and they share an audio channel with the regular walk sounds, which are interruptible. This means once you hear a vent sound, or if honked the nose, you will not hear a regular walk sound until the next night, where it clears the channel. This also affects Mangle's office sounds, You might not have even known Mangle was supposed to make noises. When Mangle's hanging from the ceiling, it's supposed to play a bunch of random noises. Balloon Boy's laugh, error sounds, walk sounds, vent walk sounds, and Mangle's specific metallic walking sounds. Because of this glitch, only the vent walk sounds and Mangle's walking sounds ever actually play. This was incidentally fixed in the ClickTeam ports because of Fusion Update 290 in late 2017, long after the last update to the PC release. You can still hear these sounds on the PC release if you toggle the game audio with Control S. That's it for the sequel, or prequel, whatever. It's time to move along to Five Nights at Freddy's 3.
This is going to be the end of a trilogy.
Yeah.
I am done. No more games, okay?
There are a few ways that your ventilation breaks in this game. Getting jump scared, not looking at any screen for too long, and just naturally over time. The speed of this natural deterioration is tied to the AI level of the night, which is pretty simple. Aside from the first night where it's 0, it's just the night number. Well, it was, until at some point Scott made Night 6 have a slightly higher AI, which means the ventilation doesn't naturally deteriorate. There are two values that handle how the cameras deteriorate. One is a timer that tracks how long you've been looking at the cameras, and once it reaches 12 seconds, it decays some of the camera health. This timer, though, continues counting even after the cameras have broken down. And while the timer does reset properly when using Reboot All, rebooting the cameras singularly doesn't reset the timer. On later nights, that can leave almost half of the deterioration unfixed. If you click one of the reboot options on the first frame you overlap them, the indicator position won't update. Like here it's rebooting ventilation, but it looks like it's doing the camera system. If you are rebooting and Phantom Freddy pulls the maintenance panel down, it will still finish rebooting. After Phantom Puppet leaves, the blackout overlay is supposed to fade away, but if you have a ventilation error, it gets stuck as half faded. That sounds sort of right, but ventilation errors are supposed to cause blackouts after an amount of time, not immediately, and getting stuck at low visibility is clearly not what's supposed to happen, even when having blackouts. Springtrap's jump scare completely disables all other jump scares. Everything except for Phantom Freddy's jump scare sound. There is one entity that can overpower Springtrap though, the Cupcake. On Cam 4, if you happen to get the 1 in 100 or 1 in 10,000 chance to get the Cupcake or Golden Cupcake, you will not see Springtrap, even if he's in the room. This is handled the opposite way around for the rare Spring Bonnie posters, where seeing the actual enemy is prioritized over Easter eggs. The rules on where you can and can't lure Springtrap are a little inconsistent, but the worst offense is that you can lure Springtrap from Cam 7 to Cam 5, but you cannot lure him from Cam 5 back to Cam 7. Springtrap has a special mode called Aggressive, not to be confused with the Aggressive cheat. That's an entirely different yet identically named thing. When Springtrap is in aggressive mode, he'll move slightly quicker and also has more options for movement, often to vents. He can become aggressive from a whole host of causes, like ventilation errors or jump scares. He's supposed to stop being aggressive at the next 15-second interval, so getting jump scared doesn't make him permanently aggressive. But there are conditions, such as ventilation being down, where he should stay aggressive. However, because the aggression reset is right before the movement events, any movement opportunity that lands on a 15-second interval acts as if you were not aggressive, no matter what. Luring Springtrap to Cam 2 while he's in the window and immediately closing cams can allow you to see his window graphic pop out of existence. Springtrap's hide behind the corner animation can play at any point the panel is being flipped down, so if it's at the end of the animation, Springtrap will very visibly pop into existence. He also barely flips in front of the doorway. When Springtrap decides on a movement, static will play on the cameras. This is to allow Springtrap to move without making him seem like he's teleporting. The static normally coincides with the actual movement, except to and from Cam 01 and his attack stages. Because you can see Springtrap in the doorway after the movement, he waits until you're looking at a screen to actually move. But that might be a while after he decided where to move if you just don't look at a camera, at which point after a couple seconds the camera static already dissipated, and upon opening cams you will see Springtrap's camera render pop in or out of the room. There does exist a far simpler, though more random way to avoid static, and view him disappear into nothingness. When Springtrap is lured from a location, the game knows to place static on the camera he left using trail objects, which spawn at his location every 3 seconds. If he moves somewhere and is lured away before he can spawn a trail, his movement to the lure won't cause any static. It is very dependent on exactly what interval he moves, where he moves, how long he takes to move to the lure, and how much static he got to begin with, but with luck, you may witness his incredible ability to warp between locations for the 4th time. Springtrap takes a small amount of time to move to an audio lure, and he is able to do normal movements during that time. Despite this, he'll still end up teleporting to the lure. While this is not too major and probably intended, it does mean that Springtrap can run across the screen, preparing for an inevitable jump scare, but then be lured to Cam 1. This particular issue was fixed for his window run, but not the one before his jump scare. I think he should have added a backwards running animation. Whenever Springtrap succeeds a movement opportunity, he rolls an action selected number, which just determines where or what he should do. Action selected 1 universally has no corresponding movement. For attack stages 1 and 2, which are the window and just past the window, action 2 also doesn't correspond to a movement. But it also doesn't reset the action selected number if there's no corresponding movement, and that causes an issue. You can't lure Springtrap from stage 2 past the window, but you can lure Springtrap from the window to Cam 2. Because the action selected number is never reset, if he had action selected 2 when lured, he'll move to Cam 2 and then immediately initiate action selected 2, which is moving to Cam 5. Which is actually pretty useful if you actually know where he went. When Springtrap is at the window and he succeeds his movement opportunity with an action selected above 2, he sets a flag such that when you next look at the cameras, he runs across the screen. This particular flag is very powerful as it can literally teleport him, but it's usually not an issue because when he's at the window, he's not going to leave any other way. Except if you use the lure to Cam 2, close the cameras, and then he succeeds his movement opportunity before actually moving to the lure. Now that flag is set, but he's not at the window, and no matter where he goes, even in the office through a vent, the next time you open the monitor, he'll be teleported past the window. Each of Springtrap's jump scares do not force the opposite side's monitor panel down. Like getting jump scared by Springtrap on the right side while opening the maintenance panel does not force it down. When done on the right, because the camera panel stays up, this allows for Springtrap to run across the screen during a jump scare. The Night 4 wall code you use for the good ending does not work as you would expect. Rather than checking a strict sequence of inputs, it allows you to go back to the start of the code and rewrite earlier numbers. Both 3 and 1 restart where you're writing the numbers, with 1 not even counting as the first number. So if you did something like 999248, the 248 is in the right place, then you can do 395 and it works as a code because the 3 started you back at the start of the code. In FNAF 3's mini-games, like BB's Air Adventure, Mangle's Quest, and Chica's Party, you can clip into the side of balloons because they're active objects and not backdrops like other platforms and walls. However, he didn't notice this until making Mangle's Quest, and fixed it so that you would move up through the balloon. But because BB's Air Adventure was the first one he made, you're free to stay clipped however long you want. You can also softlock yourself in BB's Air Adventure if you jump off this ledge where one of the spirits would be and fall to the right side of the room below. In Mangle's Quest, Mangle's head detaches from her body if you jump into the exit or the child. Horizontal movement is paused, but it will continue a jump vertically even after everything's supposed to stop. Additionally, his other body parts make sure not to move after winning or dying and won't follow the hitbox up, but the shadow and head don't and will continue moving. If you get stuck in the wall at the start in the Stage 01 minigame, you can actually jump upwards. It just takes multiple jump inputs to count as moving upwards. As well, the top hitbox is slightly smaller than the bottom hitbox on both sides, so if you're just slightly below a wall, you can jump up without hitting your head, allowing you to scale walls you weren't supposed to. You just barely have enough space, but you can leave the room after erroring in the post-night minigames, though it looks a lot weirder when he just appears through walls after 2 minutes. And the last glitch of this game is probably one of the most unique glitches I've seen in the series, but somehow has the least consequence. Look at this clip and try to think what could have even been a glitch. Yeah, nothing really happened, but for the ultra observant viewers out there, they would have noticed that the maintenance panel made the camera closing sound, not the maintenance closing sound. They are different. So, why? Well, if you scroll fast enough to the left after closing the camera system, the closing animation itself deactivates before it finishes because of a setting on the object that makes it inactive if it's off screen. This causes you to be in a weird state where most everything doesn't think you have the camera system open, except the code that handles closing the panels. And by sheer luck, the camera closing sound is ordered after the maintenance panel sound, so even though it tries to play both sounds, the camera closing sound takes priority. It's honestly a miracle it doesn't break anything else at all. But that's the last one in the trilogy. Let's check out Five Nights at Freddy's, The One in a House. I think it's best that I start this game with probably the most egregious oversight that any of the point-and-click games have. One that, honestly, probably caused many tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of unfair deaths. If you're at one of the doors, correctly hear Bonnie or Chica breathing into your ear, and close it, they might never leave, and you just lose. Simple as. Scott made sure that they won't move back into the hall while you're listening to the door. But the issue here is that Bonnie and Chica can leave the door while you're closing it. That doesn't sound like too much of an issue, they just went back into the hallway, right? Well, if you watched my FNAF 4 breakdown, no. That instead triggers a mechanic that brings them back to your door, but doesn't allow the door to remove them. So now you have the door closed, you know they were at your door, and you assume they're gonna leave, but they won't. The odds that this happens at any one time isn't too high. At worst it's about 1 in 60, because the door animation is only 10 frames. But over the course that you play the game, you're probably closing the door hundreds of times, so it's gonna happen to a few of those, and almost definitely kill you if you're not looking out for it. And it's not your fault, you closed the door when you heard breathing. There are a couple ways you can combat this. You could use a timer to make sure that you don't close the door during a 10-second interval. Or you could check for breathing every time after opening the door, though you probably won't have the time to check every time. And the intended strategy obviously isn't supposed to be using a timer. Your only real option without a timer is to only double check for breathing if you hear footsteps immediately after closing, as that can be a red flag that the glitch occurred. If you shine the flashlight at Bonnie or Chica while they're in the hallway, they don't update their in-hallway value to not in the hallway anymore. This means closing the door can still trigger the teleport mechanic, even though they're not actually in the hallway anymore. Because of the order of events, after clearing an animatronic from an area, like the door or closet in bed for Nightmare Fredbear and Nightmare, their kill timer will be a second shorter than intended. This is because each kill timer counts up to a certain value in 1-second intervals. But if you clear an animatronic, the last frame of the interval isn't included, and when they enter the area again, they instantly add a second to the counter. If a jump scare is about to start for Freddy, and it turns to 4 AM on a later night, The jump scare will instead be from Fredbear or Nightmare. Nightmare Chica's cupcake can still kill you after she's been cleared from the door. This is possible because for some odd reason, the kill timer, which counts up whenever she's at the door, doesn't reset after she leaves the hallway if it's already reached at least 20 seconds. The reason that doesn't come into play often is that the flashlight in the hall will still always reset it. But it does leave open another funny issue, where Chica could kill you after being replaced by Nightmare at 4 AM. Nightmare Foxy is the only other animatronic that can kill you while not technically even being there. If he's already progressed enough to be able to kill you, and it turns to 4 AM, his non-existence will not stop him. If both Foxy and Chica are in the far hall, and you shine the flashlight, Foxy will just pop in after Chica hides behind the corner. I know this is a mistake because it was fixed on Bonnie's side. He just instantly moves back without an animation if overlapping Bonnie, but he just didn't fix it for Chica. Animatronics store their movement opportunities if they're being stalled or have nowhere to move, waiting until they're able, like if you stop shining the flashlight into the hall. This usually doesn't pose any issues, but there are two scenarios involving Foxy and Fredbear or Nightmare that cause unintended double movements. The first is with Foxy when he's in the far hall. He's supposed to stay there, and even when 5 seconds pass and he has a movement opportunity, he doesn't have anywhere to move, so the movement flag isn't reset. Then, if you scare him away with the flashlight, he'll reset to the middle, and because he was storing a movement opportunity, immediately move again. This doesn't sound like too much of an issue until you realize it's possible that another movement opportunity can occur right after, and he then also immediately moves into the opposite far hall, and because you're still at the opposite door, he then runs straight into your room. This can all happen in less than a second, like this clip.
Okay. Huh? Ooh.
The second scenario is a lot more situational. Fredbear and Nightmare can't move into the hallway if you're shining your light into it, and while stalled can gain a movement opportunity. If they teleport into your room while they have a movement opportunity, it won't reset, and when you shine the light on your bed or close the closet, they'll retreat to the living room and immediately move again, potentially straight into the far hall. Your flashlight position is not reset to the middle if Foxy gets into the room and you're coming back from the right door, which makes it oddly difficult to click the closet. This does not happen from the left side. You can skip starting dialogue and cutscenes immediately if you try to skip on the frame that it starts, avoiding the 50 frame cooldown. This isn't possible on Night 0 because the text is set right before the cooldown, and also isn't possible on Night 6. If used on the Tomorrow is Another Day text, it also soft locks you, as you would skip setting a variable that lets the cutscene end. It's surprisingly consistent if you hold space, enter, or control, and spam left click. The start button for Nightmare and 2020-2020 mode can be clicked even when they aren't selected, and the word start is invisible. You can also enter Fun with Balloon Boy without having it unlocked, if you press enter with its button selected. The code for Plush Traps button was just copy-pasted, so we only need to beat Night 6 to enter, even though it's officially unlocked after beating Night 8. Shining the light on the exact frame that Plush Trap or Nightmare Balloon Boy moves causes them to not do their movement animation. This also causes the game to not end if this occurs while they're on the X. This is because the game makes the animation play if you shine the light and their aggression is above 200. However, moving causes their aggression to reset to exactly 200. So if you shine the light on the first frame, it's not above 200 and it doesn't recognize that it needs to play the animation. In the case that it happens on the X, it is possible for you to wait a little bit for Plush Trap's aggression to rise again, but if this happens with Nightmare Balloon Boy, I'm sorry to say, but you're as good as dead. You're normally only able to skip 1 hour of nights past Night 5 by beating Fun with Balloon Boy, and 2 hours for nights 1 to 5 with Fun with Plush Trap. But you can skip 2 hours of the All Nightmare Challenge if you play Fun with Plush Trap and start a night from 1 to 5. You're only allowed to get challenge stars if you beat night 7 or 8 with them on, but the All Nightmare challenge is a little special because it forces any night to become night 8. So if you start an earlier night, it allows Fun with Plushtrap to skip the 2 hours, then the All Nightmare challenge changes the night to be 8, and you can still get the star. FNAF 4 introduces a new type of sound error, one where the sound has no set volume and other parts of the game modify it. To make sounds louder or quieter, the game has to change the volume of the whole channel. This usually doesn't affect anything because you'd normally set the volume back to where it should be when you enter different scenes. Scott didn't make any mistakes with that in the first 3 games, but he made a few in this game. The data erase sound from the title screen is only at 10% volume if you played Fun with Balloon Boy or entered a night, and at 50% volume if you played a night and Fredbear was active. The flashlight clicks that happen when moving or turning on the flashlight are only at 25% volume if you did an 8-bit cutscene, and are muted if you completed the second night's 8-bit cutscene. It is reset to 100% if you die to Plushtrap though. And if you get jump scared in the 8-bit minigames, which happens after night 1 or 3, the volume of the door and closet creaking is increased to 100%, resetting back to the normal 30% when you next go to the title screen. But thankfully, that's all for the Tetralogy. Holy another game! Starting off Sister Location, I have an exploit that I'm not entirely sure Scott didn't know of. In Ballora's Gallery and Funtime Auditorium, the animatronics mainly get closer to you while you're pressing W. Scott also made it so that you continue moving for a quarter second after you let go of W, but they won't get any closer from that. So if you tap W for a very short amount of time, and 4 times a second, you'll be moving like normal, but they also don't get much closer to you. It's powerful enough that you can actually just ignore them entirely. Speaking of ignoring them, if you're going through the door at the end of Ballora's Gallery, Ballora is still able to jump scare you. Same for Funtime Foxy if you use the flash beacon after getting to the end of Funtime Auditorium. But I guess Mike has a strong enough stiff arm to get through the door regardless. In Baby's Parts and Service, clicking the wrong button on the same frame that you were going to die causes you to bypass the death timer, as you skip straight from 2 seconds to 4 seconds, and the game only kills you at exactly 3 seconds.
8, 3, 6, 2, 4, 4.
I did say I wasn't going to cover glitches caused by significant lag, but this particular one is pretty common and doesn't require much lag at all. If the game skips this specific frame of the scooper animation because of lag compensation, it doesn't trigger a fade to red and you soft lock. This type of glitch happens in other places, but only noticeably for the audio of The Immortal and the Restless and Ballora's jump scare sound. The custom night has a few more. While Ballora is active, the left and right hall cameras are still visible for a frame, revealing that she's actually puppeting Ennard's body. Probably not literally, but her mechanics are entirely built using Ennard's private room object and code. Her jump scare is also the only one that can be interrupted, only by Bonnet. Finally, Yendo is slightly easier than he was supposed to be. The random numbers he generates accidentally has 1 added to it, so rather than appearing 80% of the time at 20 AI, he appears 76% of the time, and rather than appearing 4% of the time at 1 AI, he just can't appear. And that would be the end for Sister Location, if it weren't for the audio. Sister Location had so many more sounds than its predecessors, 392 to be exact, and because of that, there were many more mistakes in setting them up. A metallic bang was supposed to play when entering Parts and Service, which you do hear entering the breaker room, but it's never heard for Parts and Service because Bonbon's scurrying noise uses that channel, which is muted at the start. And Baby's Parts and Service copies over the same code, so it can't be heard there either.
Great job.
As well, Bonbon was supposed to giggle after hiding. But because Funtime Auditorium mutes the channel the giggle plays on, and Parts and Service never sets the volume, you'll never hear it in-game. You might recognize it as Bonnet's giggles from the custom night, but it's not actually the same file. It is the same sound though, he just made it louder. While I'm here, you can also see one of Bonbon's hands for a few frames when he hides from this upper left position. Some light buzzing was supposed to gradually get louder as you get closer to the door in Ballora's Gallery and Funtime Auditorium, but you can never make enough progress for it to even reach 1 volume before entering the next room. A subtle dripping guts sound was intended to play alongside the main scooping sound, but it's muted because the control module's light sounds use and mute that same channel, and the scooping room never unmutes it. A more sci-fi beep was supposed to play when opening the monitor and switching cameras, but the audio channel it was supposed to play on is already used by the video static, and that was made uninterruptible. The flash beacon in Funtime Auditorium is only at a quarter volume after beating Night 4. The door sound at the end of Ballora Gallery and Night 5 Funtime Auditorium is supposed to play at the start of the fade out, but you only hear it after it finishes. This is because instead of just playing at the start of the fade, it plays on every frame of the fade out, so the sound just keeps overwriting itself until the fade out ends, and it finally gets to play uninterrupted. An extra check corrects this behavior for Night 3 Funtime Auditorium. Ennard's jump scare noise in Funtime Auditorium can be interrupted by Baby's instructions,
He is here.
or the private room voice lines.
Access denied.
He can also interrupt himself in the private room.
You must help us. You must let us inside the room.
Funtime Foxy's knocking can override any jump scare noise in the custom night, but it is frame perfect. The nose honk shares the same audio channel as Biddy Bab, so you can cut her off with the honk, and the honk will also change volume based on her progression. And there are 15 more sound errors that I'll go over in groups. First, the same uninterruptible sound glitch as FNAF 2, this time 2 things are affected. The switch sound when opening the breaker control box does not play after having played one of Bonbon's response audios. And the voice line
Motion trigger, technician control.
is supposed to play right after the Ballora's maintenance vent is opened by the Biddy Babs on Night 2, but it cannot be heard normally. There's a global event that sets the volumes of audio channel 1 and 31 for the entire game, so every time he tried to set the volume of those channels at the start of the frame, it got overwritten because global events run after start of frame. This mainly makes ambience audio much louder. If you beat the game, then start playing it again for some reason, the volume and panning of a few of the sounds just won't be right, like the Biddy Bab sounds being panned to the left or right depending on where Ballora last was, and Hand Unit, Mini Arenas, and Lolbit computer beeps are quieter than they should be. And playing the custom night, then the main game has even weirder effects. That's not your ears playing tricks on you, the bongo music is playing in your right ear. The volume of the mini arenas carries over to many different sounds in the main game, and the 7th custom night cutscene screws up a whole host of regular game sounds. Ignoring all the issues with sound, Sister Location is much more bug-free, but, you know, sound is also a lot of the game. Oh, and look at the time! It's 6 game time. Or is it? It is. The map in the office section looks symmetrical, and every mechanic should function symmetrically, but there is an accidental asymmetry in movement likelihoods. In the bottom corners, movements from the left corner are 50-50 each direction, but on the right, it's 75-25. All other locations are identical when mirrored. If you watched my Pizzeria Simulator breakdown, you'd know that the animatronics can do once-a-night teleports from the top middle room to the rooms beside you, but IDs assigned for the teleports are a little off. At some point, the first implemented animatronic was scrapped, so the IDs for the actual animatronics in the game are from 2 to 5, but the teleportations are for animatronic IDs 1 to 4, so Lefty cannot teleport. Exiting the game before the Let's Get Started screen will cause you to miss setting a variable in the tutorial, and after completing Monday's office section, will put you back into the end of the tutorial on Monday again. Similar to Sister Location's Scooper fail, the jump scare sound in the office mode only triggers on a specific frame of the jump scare, making it not too difficult to completely skip from lag and die a silent death. Changing catalog with W or S and clicking buy on the same frame causes you to purchase the item you switch to, but gives the item you switch to the stats and cost of the item you switched from. While the stats do update every frame, they update before the game checks if you press the buttons to change the catalog. This only applies to changing the catalog with your keyboard. Clicking or changing items within a catalog updates stats correctly. Because switching catalogs brings you to the first item of a catalog, there are only 4 items you can do this with. The balloon barrel and balloon cart are entirely normal. They'll take the stats of whatever item you switched from. The foil party set will only take the atmosphere and health and safety stats, but not any entertainment, revenue, or liability. The stats will also be overwritten if you upgrade to the neon party set. And the star curtain stage doesn't affect stats at all, so if you have a discounted item on Stan's budget tech, that also works as a massive discount on the stage without having to worry about extra liability. In Blueprint mode, L-Chip's icon is grayed out if you don't have the heavy animatronic stage, even though he's a mid-size animatronic and can be placed on mid-size stages. This is because he was originally a heavy animatronic as stated in his scrapped item category, but he changed to mid-size later in development. Animatronics appear above certain attractions like the gravity vortex when first loading, though when they are manually placed, the layering can be corrected. If you have an animatronic on the second slot of the double stage, upgrading to the sturdy stage will banish that animatronic to out of bounds, inaccessible until you upgrade the stage more. You do keep stats though, so you know they're alive somewhere. Placing an attraction doesn't update the stats for 5 frames, so leaving by any means during those 5 frames will keep the attraction placed down, but without the stats from it. Removing it leaves you with less stats than you started with, potentially even negative. Having negative stats causes you to garner unimaginable visitors and money at the end of nights. This is because part of the calculation includes generating a random number from 0 to the entertainment or revenue stat. But if it's negative, it overflows up to the 16-bit integer limit and generates a number from 0 to 65,000. This can also work the opposite way around, but it's frame perfect. If you remove an animatronic or attraction on the frame a fade completes, the animatronic or attraction is removed from your pizzeria but does not subtract their stats. This is because the removal of an item and the removal of the stats are 2 separate events, and moving to a different section of the game, like the catalog, is right between them, before the stats are removed. But getting infinite stats from that is a bit tedious, because it is frame perfect. There are 2 additional ways you can break the stats. Left-clicking and right-clicking an animatronic icon on the same frame results in the animatronic not being placed down until you click the slot again. The stats do get updated though, so if you leave the frame by going to the catalog or a minigame, you can keep the stats from an animatronic without ever placing it down. This happens because the right-click immediately deselects the slot, so the game doesn't know where to place the animatronic. If you clicked on a slot, it would place it, but if you leave and re-enter the frame, the queued placement gets reset and you keep the additional stats. The same glitch also affects attractions, but in an entirely different way. Rather than getting free stats for not actually placing an animatronic, you get the wrong stats for placing an attraction. The way the game normally adds stats is that it checks what attraction you have selected, which will be the attraction you just placed, and adds the stats for that attraction. But right-clicking in this instance means that you never actually had the placed attraction selected, and it adds the stats corresponding to the last attraction you had selected, or nothing. This means you can select a good attraction, do the left-right click for a bad attraction to add the stats of the good attraction, and when you remove the bad attraction, it only subtracts the lesser stats. And if you so desire, you can also get negative stats if you click a bad attraction before placing a good attraction and remove it. Also, the glitch causes the sparkles to not appear, as they instead appear off-screen where the cursor teleports when not used. Markdowns say they have a risk of animatronics, but if it isn't placeable or a speaker set, it doesn't have any liability, and would have no chance of bringing in an animatronic. Markdowns from the previous run are preserved after you get an ending or die and start a new game, allowing you to get markdowns on Monday. Clicking the catalog button and the playtest button at the same time will take your play token but send you to the catalog. You can take the car wherever you want in Midnight Motorist by mashing A and D. There is a get out trigger that makes you get out of the car if you're pressing left, and get in if you're pressing right, but if you're on the edge of the get out trigger, the movement can occur before it checks for a collision and stays in the car. This also allows you to be invisible by the house, because you're still technically in the car, so it thinks the person should be invisible. If you beat Fruity Maze after having beaten it twice, the Spring Bonnie cutscene will start playing, but not finish. This also occurs after going out of bounds. Because Ladder Tower checks for pressing the spacebar before moving the arrow hitbox, the hitbox effectively lags behind the actual arrow by a frame. This also means that if you press or hold space right after jumping, because the hitbox takes a frame to move to the arrow, it'll still be in the green and you'll successfully double jump. This causes additional arrows to spawn, though only one is real. You cannot win 2 consecutive lawsuits, so rather than a 20% chance to win a lawsuit you fight, you only have a 16% chance to win lawsuits after the first one. This is because of a special condition that is supposed to make it so that when you open the lawsuit, it doesn't repeatedly check if you won it. But unfortunately, that also means that if the RNG generates a 2 for a lawsuit, which corresponds to a win, and you go to the next lawsuit and generate a 2 again, it doesn't recognize that you won the lawsuit, because the number didn't change. It also generates numbers and wins on lawsuits you've already settled or won, so you can't even space the lawsuits you try to fight. Clicking the skip button in the first 2 seconds of entering a salvage won't skip any of the dialogue. What the skip button does is stop the tutorial audio, but it doesn't start playing until 2 seconds in. Clicking the skip button before it starts will make your salvage options appear, so you can click on them if you're fast enough, but once the tutorial is playing, you have to wait until it ends. The first ending graphic for the Insanity ending just ends. You can see the image stops right there. Thankfully, this game handles its audio much better. Only the achievement fanfare can be noticeably cut off by clicking an attraction slot or upgrading one. And these blips on the disclaimer screen are only at a quarter volume after dying in the office mode. I do regret to inform you, that's all for Pizzeria Simulator. We're moving on to our last game, Ultimate Custom Night, which also has the most errors of all the games we're covering, which makes sense considering everything he crammed into one little frame. Ultimate Custom Night is the ultimate custom night, allowing you to customize the AI levels into the negative if you click multiple times in a frame. You actually can't go above 20 by doing that. There's bounds checking that makes sure it doesn't, but nothing stops you from going below 0. I am using an auto clicker, but it's not that uncommon to occur if you have a mouse that double clicks. You are able to click a challenge button that you've already selected on the first frame that you're overlapping it. This will cause all the AI levels to reset to 0, but with the challenge still selected. You're not supposed to be able to click an already selected challenge. Scott made a don't allow counter that specifically stops that, by turning to 1 if you are currently hovering over a selected challenge. Unfortunately, that's after the click check, which means you can click an already selected challenge if it's the first frame you're hovering over it. The AI levels getting cleared is normal, however it's supposed to set the AI levels for the challenge, but they only get set when the challenge changes, so clicking a challenge again doesn't count. If you beat this empty night, you do get credit and the star for the challenge. Balloon Boy, JJ, Nightmare, Nightmare Fredbear, Nightmare Balloon Boy, and Helpy all cannot activate on one AI. It's the same error as with Yendo, where it's checking if the random number is strictly below the AI level when the random numbers start from 1. You can tell this would have been the case for Golden Freddy, but he noticed it when implementing the Fredbear Easter egg, because he made the check random 40 plus 1 is less than AI plus 1. This also means that all those animatronics are easier than they were supposed to be at their max AI levels. There was intended to be a third of a second cooldown for turning on and off the fan. It doesn't work because he set the cooldown variable of an unused copy of the desk rather than the actual desk, which is understandable because both objects are unnamed and are called the default Active 4 and Active 9. Blocking multiple animatronics in quick succession will cause you to gain fewer Faz coins than expected. You only get the Faz coin when the block sound effect ends, and if another one starts playing before it can end, you don't get the previous Faz coin. Multiple patches made the block sound quicker to partially remedy the issue, but no matter how short the sound is, it can still happen. If JJ is in the vent when you open the monitor, she's supposed to get into the room, but that will not happen if Balloon Boy happens to spawn at that moment. Despite what it says in her description, JJ does not stop you from opening doors when she's in the room, even playing an error sound when you successfully open them. If you've used the flashlight at any point before Balloon Boy disappears, rather than a pop noise, a flashlight click will play. There exists a variable that is meant to make sure it only plays when you stop pressing the actual button, but it's never set back to 0, so it also plays when your flashlight is no longer blocked, including when Balloon Boy leaves. Helpy's description says that he agitates sound-sensitive animatronics, but of the 2 sound-sensitive animatronics, he only ended up affecting one, Music Man, and not Lefty. The Pop Goes the Weasel music that plays after the marionette escapes continues to play on the kitchen camera after death coining him, humorously turning on and off during ventilation loss and power outages, as those force the cameras up and down to try to kill you. The global music box allows you to quietly hear the music box music at all times, but also forces the music to be quiet even when looking at the kitchen camera, or after the puppet escapes. In the 1.026 patch notes, Scott Cawthon mentioned a bug with Withered Bonnie where he had the potential to stay forever if you get really unlucky. In 1.026, he made it so he was more likely to disappear after a second, but he can still stay long enough to unfairly kill you while you have the mask on if you get really unlucky. Even with a perfect 0 frame reaction, you have about a 1 in 3,000 chance to just die. And taking into account any amount of reaction time easily gets it to more than a 1 in 1,000 chance or worse. Animatronics in the middle horizontal line of the ducts can be lured to the bottom, but only on the left because the nodes are 10 pixels closer than on the right. The automatic camera scroll in the monitor also affects your position in the office, which shouldn't affect anything, but you can use the flashlight while using the monitor, potentially causing your death if the camera has panned to the right, where Nightmare BB is. In a similar fashion, keeping the flashlight on Nightmare BB while opening the monitor causes him to jump scare you, no matter if you would have stood up or not. This is because the events that handle the flashlight occur in between events that handle setting his values when you open the cameras, so the game thinks you used the flashlight on him while he was sitting down, and you die. Nightmare Balloon Boy is the only animatronic in the game able to jump scare you after you win the night, though under extremely specific circumstances. Firstly, you have to open the cameras while looking at Nightmare BB, such that if you shone the light, it would interact with him. Secondly, opening the cameras must not have made him stand up, as he has a random chance to stand up every time you open them. We don't want this, as shining light on him while he's standing doesn't make him jump scare you. Thirdly, you have to be holding the flashlight button while winning the night. And finally, be lucky enough that the camera isn't scrolling over Nightmare BB right before 6 AM, which would mean you can't be holding the flashlight or he'd kill you early. This is all such that when you win the night, it automatically lowers the monitor and you're shining the flashlight on Nightmare Balloon Boy sitting down, so he kills you 2 frames after you've won the night. This situation also works after being jump scared by another animatronic while looking at the cameras, overriding the other jump scare with Nightmare Balloon Boy. This raises the question, why is he the only one where this is possible? Well, almost every animatronic makes sure it's not 6 AM and you're not being jump scared by someone else before trying to jump scare you. But that check was accidentally forgotten for Nightmare Balloon Boy. There are a few other characters like this, but they were explicitly patched out when encountered. This is just such a rare situation, very few, if not no people have encountered this naturally. But it's also only possible because of another mistake. You're not supposed to be able to turn on the flashlight during a jump scare, after running out of power, or after 6 AM. But you can keep the flashlight on if you hold the button, and it still works. Animatronics are supposed to be able to kill you on the last frame of the night, Funtime Foxy famously so. But because Plushtrap, Nightmare Chica, and Bonnet were added so late in development with the addition of XOR, their jump scare checks are performed after the game realizes it's 6 AM, and as such, cannot kill you on the last frame of the night. You can flip up both the monitor and mask for 0 frames, which does not correctly interact with animatronics. For the mask, it's not very beneficial, and notably leads to Golden Freddy just staring at you. However, flipping the cameras for 0 frames is useful. Every animatronic that would kill you from having the monitor up actually won't trigger. The only thing that triggers is Foxy's figurine switching, because it checks for the monitor flipping down, not whether the monitor stays up. Nightmarion does not fade away if you're in the monitor, but your cursor is still hovering over where you was. Lefty is one of the many characters in Ultimate Custom Night that can be cam stalled, a mechanic where an animatronic can't move and or kill you if you have their camera selected. But he could still be stalled if you had the vent or duct system selected, until it was patched in 1.019. It was, however, not patched for Rockstar Chica or Mr. Hugs. You know, Mr. Hugs from the Five Nights with Mr. Hugs game that Toy Freddy plays? Yeah, even that game's got a bug. Toy Freddy's kill state is still active after being deathcoined. He is the only one of the 7 to remain active after being deathcoined. Phantom Mangle and on-camera Faz coins visibly jump when opening the cameras. Because of event ordering, the first frame that cameras are open still uses the scroll of the office, not the automatic scrolling of the cameras. The actual camera images and objects behind the static are also misaligned, but the jump is mostly hidden by the static. Old Man Consequences' minigame, Fish or Error, will persist during jump scares and winning the night. He's set to disappear in those instances, but his minigame Appearing event is after and overwrites it. Mr. Candu can be seen on the kitchen feed, despite the fact that it is audio only.
I have something to tell you.
While the timer stops for jump scares, the hour counter does not, and will still increment if you're close enough to an hour change. As well, any audio like Phone Guy or L-Chip's ad that can play after the initial jump scare noise will leak into the game over screen.
Hello. For today's lesson, we will be continuing.
Running out of power in UCN after the bell chimes will result in the chime and music being cut off. Power out also mutes the jump scare noise if you're being jump scared. And a somewhat unique issue for Ultimate Custom Night is layering. In no other game did he have to fit as many animatronics, camera systems, and effects on one screen. The game has 17 layers, so it was inevitable that some goofy things happened. Withered Bonnie is behind the Foxy and Bonnie figurine, Foxy head, and Bounce Pot, Tangle, and White Rabbit. Trash and the gang appear behind Plushtrap and his chair. Or maybe they are just that massive. Phantom Mangle, Phantom Balloon Boy, and on-camera Faz coins are all layered above the camera static, which may be intended for gameplay purposes, but they also appear outside the monitor border, which is nonsense. Nightmare Yawn is inside the maw of Nightmare Chica. Helpy goes in front of Phantom Freddy and Rockstar Bonnie when clicked. Though before being clicked, Helpy is behind Wither Chica in the vent. A Freddle can be seen in front of Nightmare BB. The Bonnie and Foxy figurine floats above the paper balls in the FNAF 4 office. And if you're being jump scared while the monitor is flipping, the jump scares will be layered over the monitor. If the monitor is rising, it will be fixed on the way down though. Just because there are so few empty audio channels in Ultimate Custom Night, I won't cover the normal audio interruptions, but there are a couple that directly affect the game. Rockstar Foxy's spiels
Yar, who touched me bird?
can be cut off by a myriad of other sounds, immediately either giving you access to his help sooner, or killing you instantly. Phone Guy and DD or XOR can noticeably cut each other off. When DD or XOR cuts off the phone call sound, it actually successfully mutes the calls and removes the noise from the noise meter. If you click the mute button when DD or XOR are on screen, it immediately ends DD's jingle and instantly adds a challenger. XOR's jingle also gets interrupted, but doesn't advance anything. Finally, the volume of the channel for the footsteps in Old Man Consequences' Easter egg isn't reset. It ends up being only at 15 volume or muted, depending on whether you had the fan on or off when you got it. Well, that was quite a few, wasn't it? But it's also just the ones that could be gathered over the past year. It's inevitable that I missed a bunch of small stuff, maybe even a couple big ones. If you know of any glitches or weird occurrences that you didn't see here, put it in the comment section. I will be reading it. But yeah, this has every main game from Five Nights at Freddy's to Ultimate Custom Night covered. You know, except... yeah, that one. Well, unfortunately, FNAF World is a little more broken than the others, enough so that it would require a standalone video to discuss it. But if you want to see that, subscribe. In addition, while I've got a couple videos I want to do first, there will be another How FNAF Works video. Eventually. This video would not have been the same without the many contributions and input from Fulmic, Midwest Woofs, and others who noted glitches and gave feedback. And many thanks to my YouTube Taken++ members, Exploding Bears, Nick9, Astral Spiff, Crystal Jang, Cole, Colin Jason, Chili Shiba, Aurelian Soul, and Sparks. So yeah, video's over. So maybe click one of these? If you've watched this far, I guarantee they'll interest you. Or you could stay. I mean, I'm leaving, so have fun.